Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. And today we're going to talk again about price and value. And this is something I get the most questions, comments, complaints about on videos is prices or something being overpriced or, anything related to value. And in some cases, it's just a matter of people, have a price limit in their head and they don't like if anyone has a different price limit in their head, so they'll be like, you have to be an idiot to pay more than fill in the blank dollars for a knife. All right. Um, and so sometimes it's that, but other times it's, where can I get this for the best price? Or, it's a question of value, this versus that, and they cost different amounts. So I get a lot of questions along these lines. Today, what I thought I would do is share the conditions under which I'm actually going to make a point out of it in a video, because often I don't. Okay. Most of the time when I make a knife review, I'm considering whether or not this is a good knife. Is it functional and usable? Does it do what it's supposed to do when it's supposed to do it? All right, price doesn't have a big impact on that. And look, you can easily open up the website of any knife retailer and compare a bunch of prices. You don't really need me for that. And so I don't usually make a big thing out of it. But there are times where I'm going to talk about price, maybe complain about price, maybe compliment price, whatever the case may be. And so I thought I would kind of work through some of those situations with you so you kind of can get a little picture into what I'm thinking if I'm going to make, price one of my major discussion points in a video. The first thing, I need to get a couple of things out of the way. Businesses exist to make money, all right? And I don't hold a grudge against them for doing that. Obviously, whatever, if it costs $80 to make this knife, you probably have to at least double that to make a viable business out of producing it. Okay. That's just the way the world works. And you think of all the different costs that are associated with running a business. And depending on what part of the world you live in, your particular government may not make it easy. All right, so I don't begrudge businesses making money. That's the only reason they exist. Okay. Um, However, I will complain sometimes about a knife company that sort of loses sight. I really, my perfect world would be a world where people who make knives love knives and they love making knives and they're trying to find a way to make a living doing that. And that's pretty exciting. Now, there are definitely companies where, there's no indication that they love knives. There's no indication they could care a thing about knives. If they were making, pencils or barbells or bicycles, they wouldn't care, right? They're just trying to make something to turn a profit. Two different approaches, and certainly I appreciate more those companies who seem to love knives and specifically go into the knife world because that's their passion. All right. The other thing I've got to say along these lines, so, businesses exist to make money. I've got to say some of the comments I get, essentially feel like knife envy, right? I really want this knife. I like this knife, but I can't afford, the 200 and something dollars that it costs. And so I'm going to be angry about that and say, well, who charges that much money for a stupid knife? As if they're, well, oh, sorry, you just can't afford it. There's lots of things that I like. I love Andrew Demko Customs. I love Peter Resenti. There's lots of custom makers that I really like. I will never likely own any of their knives because it's just not practical for me, right? I can't justify spending. And by the way, I'm in Canada and our dollar is not strong. So, a $1,500 US dollar knife is more like, it's going to be well over $2,000 Canadian. All right. So, for me, and I'm not going to whine and complain about that. I just go, okay, no big deal. I can't afford it. There's lots of other nice knives that I can't afford. Not the end of the world. But I definitely get a number of comments from people who are just mad that something costs more than they can afford. And it's like, well, sorry, just deal with it. You can't afford it. I have a car, the car that I have. Are there other cars that I would like? Sure. I can't afford them all. So I buy the one that I can afford. All right. That's just the way life goes. And I'm not going to stress myself out over it, and I don't recommend you do either. But I definitely get some comments where people are really getting animated about the fact they can't afford something. So I don't recommend that. The other thing I want to mention here in passing is clones. Just because you can't afford something does not justify you buying a clone. All right, and that whole that whole fake industry is a problem. Not so much because, look, if you know it's a clone and they've made pretty clear that it's a copy, at least you know what you're getting. The problem is a lot of those same companies are not just doing that; they're also trying to fake those knives and sell them to people, who think they're getting a great deal on something really expensive, and that's a really, really bad deal. Okay, so the next thing is market determines value. Okay, something is only worth what people will pay for it. That's true for retailers. All right, CRKT a couple of times. The Liang Ma eraser was an early CRKT model. This is a more recent. This is the linchpin, but the eraser was priced around $80, and it just didn't do well. And back then it was just because people were not interested. They didn't have that concept of CRKT. Mostly they still don't, right? And so you don't see CRKT too often making expensive stuff. From time to time, they've tried to make a foray into the higher end of the marketplace. It usually doesn't go well for them. And sometimes they get a knife just priced really poorly. All right, so the linchpin is an example where they're asking like $120 for these, which is insane given the materials that it's made of. Look, the lock is nice, the design is cool. It's not that this is a bad knife, but it's the value is just way out of whack. Okay, and so the market definitely determines value for retailers, but it also determines value on the secondary market. And so that may mean, I loved this knife and I, saved up and bought one for $300. And, maybe I was kind of at the end of the popularity cycle, and now no one's willing to pay $300 for one. So I decide, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months later, I don't like it. And I'm like, well, I paid $300, so I'll put it up for $300. Well, what you need to do is figure out what people are paying for them, what they're going for elsewhere, and then base your price on that. And I recently had a discussion with someone who got so mad about this. It was purely hypothetical, and that's kind of what made me laugh, that this guy was getting so frustrated over a hypothetical situation. But someone had said, hey, the value is determined by what people are willing to pay. So you need to do your research, look up other places that are selling this, see what they're selling it for, use and price accordingly. And he came up with this weird scenario in which he said, so what happens if I buy a knife for $500 and for some reason everyone decides to, the week before or the week after, a couple people sell theirs for $50, now I'm out $450. And so I made the mistake of replying, and I said, look, that's very, very unlikely, okay, that something is going to change that much in that short of an amount of time. But I said, in your theoretical situation, if everyone did start selling them for $50, yeah, yours is no longer worth $500. Although I said, this is an extremely weird hypothetical situation you have created here. All right. And so it was, I just thought I'd share that as, people do think about this, and they kind of get caught up in it, especially if you're new to the knife market. It can be difficult to figure out how much something is going for. And the big thing I would say about this is do your research. As knife buyers, as knife consumers, I think we have a responsibility to look for and take the best price available. I know that some of you watching maybe, retailers, or you've got something to sell that the market has kind of dropped on and you don't like that. But I'm relentless about this. I will not pay more than I have to. Look, there are a lot of things that I need to spend my money on. Knives is not one of them. And so if I'm going to buy a knife, it has to be the very best price that I can possibly find. And of course, I'm always careful, and I make sure that, I'm not buying fakes or anything like that. We kind of brought that up a minute ago. But I do believe the market has a responsibility, consumers have a responsibility to be careful with their purchasing and make companies keep that value where it needs to be. All right, so that's my sort of introductory remarks. So now let's get to, I know we're 9 minutes in and I'm just finishing my introduction, but there were a couple of things that I really wanted to get through there. And some of those things we've talked about before, and some of that stuff is new. So when am I actually going to comment on value? When am I going to say, hold on, this is really, really badly priced? Or maybe it's a great price. Okay. First of all, I'm not going to do it on the secondary market. So if I'm on Blade forums and I'm scrolling through and I see someone's like, hey, here's my S35 Para 2, I want $375 for it. I'm like, well, your funeral, right? I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna stop and explain to them that they're ridiculously overpriced. All right. Same is true like on Facebook or whatever. Unless I know the person, there have been times where this is a personal friend, this is someone I know well and I've dealt with before, and so I'll send them a personal message and say, hey man, I don't know if you're aware, but that knife was on sale last week, brand new for half the price that you're listing it for used. All right. And I've done that before, but again, it's only with someone I know really well. Otherwise, I'm just going to let them figure out that, oh, no one's buying this because I have it priced too high. All right. Now, what about, now on the positive side, by the way, I definitely will talk about great deals. And I try to go out of my way to share with you guys either here or on the Sharp Stuff Facebook page or on Canadian Knife and Gear, anywhere I can reach out to people. If there's a really, really good deal, I'm going to tell people about it. I remember when this knife, for example, was on knife sale. This is the Cold Steel 8010, Cold Steel 8015, Kyser Harpoon, Mora, Bushcraft Black, Chris Reeve Knives, Nayala. Zero tolerance 0562. Okay, I've had the Gyros Globetrotter on camera, and I've also had the CRKT linchpin as well. I know sometimes I forget to tell you guys, so I'll just take a minute and do that. Hopefully I'll continue to remember as we go through. But you could buy an 8010 for $100 on Knife Center. That was ridiculous. And yeah, I made a point to share that as far and wide as I could because that was just a stupidly good price. And these nowadays are like $190 at most retailers. So they've climbed. By the way, they've climbed a lot, and this will come up again when a knife drastically jumps up in price. I'm going to say something about that as well, and this is an example of that happening. So, this knife, is definitely notable in this discussion because there was a time where you could get them for $100. When they first came out, by the way, they were all, I don't know, around 190 or something like that. Or I mean, around 140 or something like that. And now they're up to 190. So that's a pretty significant jump. And it definitely impacts what I think about this knife. So I would easily recommend this at $150. At 190, I'm probably going to say, hey, wait till it goes on sale, right? Buy one on the secondary market, something like that. I would not be interested in paying $190 for it. That's just me. So I'm definitely going to say something in that kind of a situation. All right. Of course, if there's any functional issue at all, I'm going to bring it up, and I don't care what the price point is for that. So, if it's a $30, $20, folder, if it's I don't know, a Rat Model 1 or a price like a Rat Model 1 and it's got all these issues, guess what? I'm going to tell you guys about it because that's not cool. All right. And so major functional issues, it doesn't lock up right. It's got some major fit and finish flaws. The blade centering is way off. Like there's some issue that affects the proper functioning of the knife. I'm going to say that no matter what price point. Now, as the price point goes up or down, there are some things that I'm going to be more forgiving about. So let's say, I don't know. So this was like $375 brand new. If this had bad blade centering, I would make a huge issue of that. Okay, it doesn't. It has perfect centering. But at that price point, everything has to be perfect, right? I'm not willing to put up with the slightest little issue. So the detent's got to be perfect. The action's got to be smooth as silk. There can't be any centering. There can't be any lock stick. There just can't be any problem at a high price point. And I'm going to complain about it if there is. And really that's true. Probably around $100 or so, I start getting really, really picky. All right. So when Benchmade, when Benchmade was struggling with some things, they tended to have really uneven grinds, bad blade centering. They seem to have really gotten a lot better, But the price they were asking for their knives, between say 120 and $200, sometimes even more, and to pay 160 bucks or something to get a knife with bad blade centering or uneven grind is just not acceptable. And so there's a point where it's primarily a fit and finish issue. It's not really going to affect the value, the function of the knife, okay? But I'm definitely going to be upset about it because at that price point, it has to be right. Poor finishes, okay? Crappy screws, something that's loose. If sometimes you get a knife and you can kind of feel it here. Okay, shake it around. I don't have any examples because I don't tend to keep knives like that or buy them in the first place if I can avoid it. I'm going to say something because at higher price points, that just shouldn't happen. All right. Let's say there was just a really bad, somehow when they were sharpening, they slipped and messed this bevel up totally. I'm going to complain about that. This is not, again, not a cheap knife. These are even more, I think these are like $215 these days. And again, when they first came out, I think they were around $250 or $260. So this is another example of a knife that's jumped quite a bit in terms of price point. Let's switch some stuff out here. There's a knife that, for example, by the way, this is not the original clip, but this knife, these were, I don't know, 140 bucks. They might even been a little bit more than the standard version of the Mannix, and they just weren't popular. I reviewed this a couple of years ago. I absolutely loved it. I was the only one. So they discontinued the model pretty quickly and got rid of it. And I was sad to see it go because I loved it and I'm glad I've got one. But when they discontinued it, they cleared those things out and you could buy one of these for like $90, which was incredible. Lion Steel, I've tended to find great value on their fixed blades. Now their folders, I haven't loved every single one. Actually, the one that really stands out to me is the Lion Steel Kerr. That was such a great knife. It still is a great knife. But their fixed blades, the value is really on point. This thing, to get this for $150, and I think the BT35, a number of you have asked me about the B35. I definitely want one. None of the retailers that I normally use have any in stock, but it's on my list, okay? And hopefully I can get one, but this is the M4 and I think the value on this is really, really good. Like for $150, this is an incredible fixed blade with a very nice sheath, by the way. So I'll definitely tell you if I think the value is good. If poor fit and finish, yeah, that's gonna tweak me. Materials. All right, at a certain price point, I do expect nicer materials. So, if it's $70, $80, $100, I want to see G10, not FRN. If it's over $100, yeah, FRN does not belong on anything. Really, I don't think FRN belongs on any knife. I'm just not a fan of it. It just feels cheap. Just use G10. I know it is cheaper, and so people are trying to cut the price point, but I'm like, well, anyway. So that's one of my pet peeves. Here's a knife, I complained about this on this knife. This has cheap materials, right? The blade steel, if you actually look up the 14116 steel, you'll actually hear people talk about, this is one of the cheapest knife steels you can buy. And they're talking about it from as a manufacturer, right? So CRKT went out and used the cheapest possible decent steel they could get and then charged $120 for this knife. You just can't do that. And same FRN, this is $120 with FRN, not acceptable at all. So materials and some that stand out, FRN versus G10, laminate carbon fiber. I hate laminate carbon fiber. I wish it would just go away. If you're going to use carbon fiber, use carbon fiber. If you're going to use G10, use G10. Actually, I've got the Spyderco Akuchi today, and I like this knife. I really, really do. It's crazy fun to play with, but why do you have to put a carbon fiber sticker on here? Okay, it just makes me crazy. If you, and I don't think this knife needs it, right? This would have looked great just in black G10, or especially, Spyderco offered a bunch of different colors, blue, brown, blue, green, Spyderco loves those bright colors. Anyway, not a fan of the laminate CF. The value on this knife is not crazy. The value, yeah, this is not an outlandishly priced knife. It's actually pretty reasonable, but that's something I'm going to bring up. VG10 steel and N690 steel. There are really expensive, like two, three, four, $500 knives that have N690 steel, which is a middle of the road steel at best. All right, and by the way, one thing I will complain about here for a moment is that, when you get a knife that is supposed to be special and interesting, it should have a steel that's special. Now, does it have to have, I don't know, S90V or Crewware or whatever, whatever special steel is out there? It doesn't have to have it, but it's a lot nicer when I'm buying a knife that is special, that I'm gonna value highly. Um, it's nice to not see just S35VN, right? S35VN is a great steel. It's absolutely fantastic as a user steel, but it's just everywhere. All right, so this is a bit of an aside. And you see a lot of knives out there with S35VN that are really expensive, and the price point makes me go, this should have something special and unique that you just don't find any old place. All right. We've already talked about this, but I'm definitely going to mention huge price jumps. So Spyderco has done this with their map pricing. ZT did a bit of a bump last year. We'd already talked about the two cold steels and how they jumped quite a bit. And when that happens, I'm going to say, like, hey, when this knife came out, we already talked about this. This knife was $140 and now it's $190. That's a big jump. All right, and that's a little frustrating. And as a reviewer, I feel like I have to tell you about that. Knives that I feel like don't do well in terms of the value equation. I'm going to tell you that. So this is a combination of maybe materials, features, stuff like that. The Spyderco Paisan was a good example. If that knife was $300 or $250, I wouldn't have complained at all. But at 500 and some and change, I can't remember what they were. I think 525. So 525 for the Paisan to end up with a blade that was poorly ground, to end up with a lockup that was, I mean, not a lockup, but a detent that was less than stellar. At 525, it has to be perfect. It has to be mind-blowingly good. Like, it just cannot have a single issue. It has to be better than perfect. All right. And so the Paisan was an example. Let's bring this guy in. Another one was the Liangma Nuke. All right, it was over $100. I think it was like $115, and it was a stainless steel frame lock, for crying out loud. And I'll be honest, I didn't do my due diligence when I bought one. I saw it coming out. I was like, hey, that's a cool looking knife. I think I bought it. And when it came and it was stainless steel, I was like, you have got to be kidding me. All right. And so that was pretty disappointing. And finally, the last thing I want to point out here is that when it comes to cost, one of the things we need to understand is, you can't really just do the math and be like, okay, this knife or this knife has this much steel and this much G10 and this much titanium and this much carbon fiber, and add up some hours and go, there you go, that's what the knife should cost. That's not really how it works, right? Cost has a lot to do with all kinds of factors. It has to do with marketing. It has to do with availability. It has to do with where I want this knife to sit. Do I want it to be considered a value knife? Do I want it to be considered a high-end knife? Because guess what? I've got to adjust my prices accordingly. And so, and by the way, it has to do with supply and demand. There are a couple of, the examples of like the Grimsmos and the Holts and the Gareth Bull, Shamwari, those knives became in such high demand, all right, that the makers raised their prices. And I think that makes sense. I can only imagine being a maker where you're charging, I don't know, $700. I think the Shamwaris were like going for $600-700, and people are selling them on the secondary market for 2-3 times what you're getting. That's going to be frustrating, right? And so I can't really hold it against a maker who says, wait a second, if people are paying, $1,500 for my knife, why in the world am I charging $700 or $800, right? The other thing is supply and demand. If you know that you can only produce a certain amount and you're trying to slow down the demand for your knife, you will likely raise the price. That's an easy way to get the demand to slow down a little bit. And so, yeah, there are some companies. Now, I will complain, there are some overseas companies that, I have, especially ones who've come out now. And I'm looking through, a couple of different retailers' websites and like brand new to the market, they've come out with a titanium frame lock with S35EN steel and it's an okay design. And they go, yep, we want $300 for this. And I'm like, I don't even know who you are. Your company didn't exist yesterday. You don't have the cred to charge me $300. I'm not paying it. All right. And so that definitely happens sometimes. Sometimes I feel like some of the things we see, Custom Knife Factory, for example, they've got a bunch of really, really nice design collaborations and they're really expensive. Like compared to what they were charging before, the only thing I can think of is they must have some deal in place with makers to try and not hurt the market for their customs. They must do this. That's the only kind of thing that I can think of. Another good example where price needs to be mentioned is Kysers. So Kysers are decent knives. They really are. They have a lot of nice models out there, but they don't hold their value at all. All right, they always come out in the first year. They get a couple of hot designs that are flying off the shelves, and for the month or two that they're hot, they'll demand a good price. But if you buy one and then a few months later decide, hey, I want to sell it, the normal rules do not apply. So normally you'd go, hey, let's I'll subtract 15 or 20% here and sell it on the used market, no big deal. Well, with Kysers, you might not get 50% of what you paid because they just don't hold their value. So I'm definitely going to mention when that kind of thing happens. And then the last thing that I will do is, if there's a feature or a material that's really, really impressive and, you can get it for a pretty good price, I'll probably say something about that. So I've mentioned many times on this channel, the Real Steel Magmadhan, which is an incredible, which just has this crazy action. At least the original ones did. And that thing was like, I don't know, $180 or something for the most insane action you could imagine on a folding knife. That's something I'm going to mention as well. If there's an example where you can get something that, a property or a feature that you wouldn't see outside of, spending thousands of dollars, but here's something for a few $100s. I'll probably say something about that as well. So there you go, guys. That's sort of the times where I'm going to be like, hey, something is not right here. The value is out of whack. I may still say it's a good knife. I may go, hey, this is a great knife. It's fully functional. It does all the things that I want a knife to do. However, it's completely off the charts when it comes to the value equation. All right. And I'm definitely going to say something like that if that's how I feel. Now, the last thing I will point out is many times I won't talk about cost. I've actually had people go online, comment on videos. How much does the knife cost? I watched the whole video. I don't know how much it costs. And I'm like, do you have Google? One, the price of knives changes quite a bit. I get a ton of comments. When I reviewed this knife, it was $150. And so I talked about how great of a deal it was. Well, now it's $190. So people are always asking me, hey, where did you find this knife for that much money? They don't notice that the video is 2.5 years old or whatever. It's not that old, but they don't realize how long it's been around. And I just have to say, hey, the price went up. But I often don't talk about price because number one, the price often does go up. And number two, it's often one of those things where that's not really what I'm assessing. All right. I only mention value if there's some reason to do so. If it's really, really a good deal or if it's really a bad deal, I'm going to say something. Otherwise, I'm just going to tell you whether or not it's a good knife. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Go ahead and check the links below. Check out DLT Trading. A number of the knives I've had in here can be had over there. They tend to have a really good stock of, some of the higher end stuff, Chris Reeves and CRKs and Hinderers and that kind of thing. So if you're looking for that, DLT is a great place to go. I'll put an affiliate link down in the description, and using that link does help the channel a lot. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.